There was a newcomer in the village. New people were always a source of interest and speculation among them, but this time Pepper had impressive news. "She's moved into Jasmine Cottage, and she's a witch," she said. "I know, because Mrs. Henderson does the cleaning, and she told my mother she gets a witch's newspaper. She gets loads of ordinary newspapers too, but she gets this special witches one." "My father says there's no such thing as witches," said Wensleydale, who had fair, wavy hair and peered seriously out at life through thick, black-rimmed spectacles. It was widely believed that he had once been christened Jeremy, but no one ever used the name, not even his parents, who called him Youngster. They did this in the subconscious hope that he might take the hint. Wensleydale gave the impression of having been born with a mental age of 47. "Don't see why not," said Brian, who had a wide, cheerful face under an apparently permanent layer of grime. "I don't see why witches shouldn't have their own newspaper, with stories about all the latest spells and that. My father gets Angler's Mail, and I bet there's more witches than anglers." "It's called Psychic News," volunteered Pepper. "That's not witches," said Wensleydale. "My aunt has that. That's just spoon-bending and fortune-telling and people thinking they were Queen Elizabeth I in another life. There's no witches any more, actually. People invented medicines and that, and told them they didn't need them anymore and started burning them." "It could have pictures of frogs and things," said Brian, who was reluctant to let a good idea go to waste. And road tests of broomsticks, and a cat's column." "Anyway, your aunt could be a witch," said Pepper. "In secret. She could be your aunt all day and go witching at night." "Not my aunt," said Wensleydale darkly. "And recipes," said Brian. "New uses for leftover toad." "Oh, shut up," said Pepper. Brian snorted. If it had been Wensley who had said that, there'd have been a half-hearted scuffle, as between friends. But the other them had long ago learned that Pepper did not consider herself bound by the informal conventions of brotherly scuffles. She could kick and bite with astonishing physiological accuracy for a girl of 11. Besides, at 11 years old, the them were beginning to be bothered by the dim conception that laying hands on good old Pep moved things into blood-thumping categories they weren't entirely at home with yet, besides earning you a snake-fast blow that would have floored the Karate Kid. But she was good to have in your gang. They remembered with pride the time when Greasy Johnson and his gang had taunted them for playing with a girl. Pepper had erupted with a fury that had caused Greasy's mother to come round that evening and complain. Pepper looked upon him, a giant male, as a natural enemy. She herself had short red hair and a face which was not so much freckled as one big freckle with occasional areas of skin. Pepper's given first names were Pippin, Galadriel, Moonchild. She had been given them in a naming ceremony in a muddy valley field that contained 3 sick sheep and a number of leaky polythene teepees. Her mother had chose the Welsh valley of Pantygirdle as the ideal site to return to nature. 6 months later, sick of the rain, the mosquitoes, the men, the tent-trampling sheep who ate first the whole commune's marijuana crop and then its antique minibus, and by now beginning to glimpse why almost the entire drive of human history has been an attempt to get as far away from nature as possible, Pepper's mother returned to Pepper's surprise grandparents in Tadfield, bought a bra, and enrolled in a sociology course with a deep sigh of relief. There are only 2 ways a child can go with a name like Pippin, Galadriel, Moonchild, and Pepper had chosen the other one. The 3 male them had learnt this on their first day at school, in the playground, at the age of 4. They had asked her name, and, all innocent, she had told them. Subsequently, a bucket of water had been needed to separate Pippin, Galadriel, Moonchild's teeth from Adam's shoe. Wensleydale's first pair of spectacles had been broken, and Brian's sweater needed 5 stitches. The them were together from then on, and Pepper was Pepper forever, except to her mother and, when they were feeling especially courageous, and the them were almost out of earshot, Greasy Johnson and the Johnsonites, the village's only other gang. Adam drummed his heels on the edge of the milk crate that was doing the office of a seat, listening to this bickering with the relaxed air of a king listening to the idle chatter of his courtiers. He chewed lazily on a straw. It was a Thursday morning. The holidays stretched ahead, endless and unsullied. They needed filling up. He let the conversation float around him like the buzzing of grasshoppers, or, more precisely, like a prospector watching the churning gravel for a glint of useful gold. "In our Sunday paper it said there was thousands of witches in the country," said Brian, "worshipping nature and eating health food and that, so I don't see why we shouldn't have one round here. They were flooding the country with a wave of mindless evil," it said. "What, by worshipping nature and eating health food?" said Wensleydale. "That's what it said." The them gave this due consideration. They had once, at Adam's instigation, tried a health food diet for a whole afternoon. Their verdict was that you could live very well on healthy food provided you had a big cooked lunch beforehand. Brian leaned forward conspiratorially. And it said they dance around with no clothes on, he added. They go up on hills and Stonehenge and stuff and dance with no clothes on. This time the consideration was more thoughtful. The them had reached that position where, as it were, the roller coaster of life had almost completed the long haul to the top of the first big humpback of puberty, so that they could just look down into the precipitous ride ahead, full of mystery, terror, and exciting curves. Huh, said Pepper. Not my aunt, said Wensleydale, breaking the spell. Definitely not my aunt. She just keeps trying to talk to my uncle. Your uncle's dead, said Pepper. She says he still moves the glass about, said Wensleydale defensively. My father said it was moving glasses about the whole time that made him dead in the first place. Don't know why she wants to talk to him, he added. They never talked much when he was alive. That's necromancy, that is. It's in the Bible. She ought to stop it. God's dead against necromancy. And witches. You can go to hell for it. There was a lazy shifting of position on the milk crate throne. Adam was going to speak. The them fell silent. Adam was always worth listening to. Deep in their hearts, the them knew that they weren't a gang of 4. They were a gang of 3, which belonged to Adam. But if you wanted excitement and interest and crowded days, then every them would prize a lowly position in Adam's gang above leadership of any other gang anywhere. Don't see why everyone's so down on witches, Adam said. The them glanced at each other. This sounded promising. Well, they blight crops, said Pepper, and sink ships, and tell you if you're going to be king and stuff, and brew up stuff with herbs. My mother uses herbs, said Adam. So does yours. Oh, those are all right, said Brian, determined not to lose his position as a cult expert. I expect God said it was all right to use mint and sage and so on. Stands to reason there's nothing wrong with mint and sage. And they can make you be ill by just looking at you, said Pepper. It's called the evil eye. They give you a look, and then you get ill, and no one knows why. And they make a model of you and stick it full of pins, and you get ill where all the pins are, she added cheerfully. That sort of thing doesn't happen anymore, reiterated Wensleydale, the rational thinking person, because we invented science and all the vicars set fire to the witches for their own good. It was called the Spanish Inquisition. Then I reckon we should find out if her at Jasmine Cottage is a witch, and if she is, we should tell Mr. Pickersgill, said Brian. Mr. Pickersgill was the vicar. Currently, he was in a dispute with them over subjects ranging from climbing the yew tree in the churchyard to ringing the bells and running away. I don't reckon it's allowed going around setting fire to people, said Adam. Otherwise people would be doing it all the time. It's all right if you're religious, said Brian reassuringly, and it stops the witches from going to hell, so I expect they'd be quite grateful if they understood it properly. Can't see Picky setting fire to anyone, said Pepper. Oh, I dunno, said Brian meaningfully. Not actually setting them on actual fire, sniffed Pepper. He's more likely to tell their parents and leave it up to them if anyone's going to be set on fire or not. The them shook their heads in disgust at the current low standards of ecclesiastical responsibility. Then the other 3 looked expectantly at Adam. They always looked expectantly at Adam. He was the one that had the ideas. Perhaps we ought to do it ourselves, he said. Someone ought to be doing something if there's all these witches about. It's like that neighbourhood watch scheme. Neighbourhood witch, said Pepper. No, said Adam coldly. But we can't be the Spanish Inquisition, said Wensleydale. We're not Spanish. I bet you don't have to be Spanish to be the Spanish Inquisition, said Adam. I bet it's like Scottish eggs or American hamburgers. It just has to look Spanish. We've just got to make it look Spanish. Then everyone would know it's the Spanish Inquisition. There was silence. It was broken by the crackling of one of the empty crisp packets that accumulated wherever Brian was sitting. They looked at him. I've got a bullfight poster with my name on it, said Brian slowly. Lunchtime came and went. The new Spanish Inquisition reconvened. The head inquisitor inspected it critically. What are those? He demanded. You click them together when you dance, said Wensleydale, a shade defensively. My aunt brought them back from Spain years ago. They're called maracas, I think. They've got a picture of a Spanish dancer on them. Look. What's she dancing with a bull for? Said Adam. That's to show it's Spanish, said Wensleydale. Adam let it pass. The bullfight poster was everything Brian had promised. Pepper had something rather like a gravy boat made out of raffia. It's for putting wine in, she said defiantly. My mother brought it back from Spain. It hasn't got a bull on it, said Adam severely. It doesn't have to, Pepper countered, moving just ever so slightly into a fighting stance. Adam hesitated. His sister Sarah and her boyfriend had also been to Spain. Sarah had returned with a very large purple toy donkey which, while definitely Spanish, did not come up to what Adam instinctively felt should be the tone of the Spanish Inquisition. The boyfriend, on the other hand, had brought back a very ornate sword which, despite its tendency to bend when picked up and go blunt when asked to cut paper, proclaimed itself to be made of Toledo steel. Adam had spent an instructive half-hour with the encyclopedia and felt that this was just what the Inquisition needed. Subtle hints had not worked, however. In the end, Adam had taken a bunch of onions from the kitchen. They might well have been Spanish, but even Adam had to concede that, as decor for the inquisitorial premises, they lacked that certain something. He was in no position to argue too vehemently about raffia wine holders. Very good, he said. You certain they're Spanish onions? Said Pepper, relaxing. Course, said Adam. Spanish onions, everyone knows that. They could be French, said Pepper doggedly. France is famous for onions. It doesn't matter, said Adam, who was getting fed up with onions. France is nearly Spanish, and I don't expect witches know the difference, what with spending all their time flying around at night. It all looks like the continent to witches. Anyway, if you don't like it, you can jolly well go and start your own Inquisition anyway. For once, Pepper didn't push it. She'd been promised the post of head torturer. No one doubted who was going to be Chief Inquisitor. Wensleydale and Brian were less enthralled with their roles of inquisitorial guards. Well, you don't know any Spanish, said Adam, whose lunch hour had included 10 minutes with a phrase book Sarah had brought in a haze of romanticism in Alicante. That doesn't matter, because actually you have to talk in Latin, said Wensleydale, who also had been doing some slightly more accurate lunchtime reading. And Spanish, said Adam firmly. That's why it's the Spanish Inquisition. I don't see why it shouldn't be a British Inquisition, said Brian. Don't see why we should have fought the Armada and everything, just to have their smelly Inquisition. This had been slightly bothering Adam's patriotic sensibilities as well. I reckon, he said, that we should start sort of Spanish, and then make it the British Inquisition when we've got the hang of it. And now, he added, the Inquisitorial Guard will go and fetch the first witch, por favor. The new inhabitant of Jasmine Cottage would have to wait, they'd decided. What they needed to do was start small and work their way up. Art thou a witch? Olé, said the Chief Inquisitor. Yes, said Pepper's little sister, who was 6 and built like a small golden-haired football. You mustn't say yes, you've got to say no, hissed the head torturer, nudging the suspect. And then what? Demanded the suspect. And then we torture you to make you say yes, said the head torturer. I told you, it's good fun, the torturing. It doesn't hurt. Hasta la vista, she added quickly. The little suspect gave the decor of the inquisitorial headquarters a disparaging look. There was a decided odour of onions. Huh, she said. I want to be a witch, with a warty nose and a green skin and a lovely cat, and I'd call it Blackie and lots of potions, and the head torturer nodded to the Chief Inquisitor. Look, said Pepper desperately, no one's saying you can't be a witch, you just have to say you're not a witch. No point in us taking all this trouble, she added severely, if you go around saying yes the minute we ask you. The suspect considered this. But I want to be a witch, she wailed. The male then exchanged exhausted glances. This was out of their league. If you just say no, said Pepper, you can have my Cindy stable set. I've never ever used it, she added, glaring at the other them and daring them to make a comment. You have used it, snapped her sister. I've seen it, and it's all worn out, and the bit where you put the hay is broken. Adam gave a magisterial cough. Art thou a witch? Viva España, he repeated. The sister took a look at Pepper's face and decided not to chance it. No, she decided. It was a very good torture, everyone agreed. The trouble was getting the putative witch off it. It was a hot afternoon, and the inquisitorial guards felt that they were being put upon. Don't see why me and Brother Brian should have to do all the work, said Brother Wensleydale, wiping the sweat off his brow. I reckon it's about time she got off and we had a go. Benedictine ina decanta. Why have we stopped? Demanded the suspect, water pouring out of her shoes. It had occurred to the Chief Inquisitor during his researches that the British Inquisition was probably not yet ready for the reintroduction of the Iron Maiden and the choke pear, but an illustration of a medieval ducking stool suggested that it was tailor-made for the purpose. All you needed was a pond and some planks and a rope. It was the sort of combination that always attracted them, who never had much difficulty in finding all three. The suspect was now green to the waist. "It's just like a seesaw," she said. "Whee!" "I'm going to go home unless I can have a go," muttered Brother Brian. "Don't see why evil witches should have all the fun." "It's not allowed for inquisitors to be tortured too," said the chief inquisitor sternly, but without much real feeling. It was a hot afternoon, the inquisitorial robes of old sacking were scratchy and smelled of stale barley, and the pond looked astonishingly inviting. All right, he said, and turned to the suspect. "You're a witch, all right, don't do it again, and now you get off and let someone else have a turn. Olé," he added. "What happens now?" said Pepper's sister. Adam hesitated. Setting fire to her would probably cause no end of trouble, he reasoned. Besides, she was too soggy to burn. He was also distantly aware that at some future point there would be questions asked about muddy shoes and duckweed-encrusted pink dresses. But that was the future, and it lay at the other end of a long, warm afternoon that contained planks and ropes and ponds. The future could wait.